Memorial Day. Who is it for? We'll talk about that and more on this episode of BS3 Presents The Morning Shift with Cole Johnson. Well, good morning, shifters. It is May 27, 2024. And on the calendar, it now reads it's Memorial Day. So we will commemorate Memorial Day with this episode. Of course, that is the cover story. Along with that, we will touch on, of course, George Floyd. 4 years later, have we learned anything as a society? And we will also touch on how to grieve and how to properly support those who are grieving. Those are on tap for the rest of the show, but for now, let's start you up. And here's what's going on in the world today. Unfortunately, we are going through a lot of storms and tornadoes in the Midwest and the plains, and somewhat touching in the Southwest area too. As storms and tornadoes sweep across the nation and have done so Sunday, and it killed at least 14 people in Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, before rolling across Kentucky and Indiana, injuring many others, and knocking down power lines and delaying the start even of the Indianapolis 500. In Cook County, Texas, Sheriff Ray Simperton said at least 7 people died there. 4 of them when an apparent tornado ripped through a neighborhood near Valley View, and that's 60 miles north of the Metroplex area, right near the Oklahoma border. It was described as many people being injured early Sunday when the storm struck a nearby travel center and a gas station complex where more than 60 residents sought shelter there. Wow. Many prayers from the Morning Shift to all of you. Now, across the nation, families are looking for a quick option to feed the family. Has seen prices rise as inflation has taken a bite out of the fast food experience. The Bureau of Labor Statistics' latest reading from the so-called fast food index saw an annual inflation for the sector coming in at about 4.8%. The BLS also found that prices in limited service restaurants increased by 47% ever since 2014. So for the last decade, fast food has become a staple of American diet, but it also has meant that the price increases at the drive-thru have made a major impact as well. Few topics are more taboo than erectile dysfunction. Now, though countless men have experienced the frustration or embarrassment of failing to perform as expected during intercourse, it's not something you're likely to hear of them publicly own. But multiple sexual experts have said that erectile dysfunction is nothing to be ashamed of, and that acknowledging it, that it sometimes occurs, really can be healthy. From Dr. Paul Turek, a men's fertility physician and the director of the Turek Clinic in San Francisco, he says, quote, "One can consider erectile dysfunction to be a part of a complex, normal, stressful life. But believe you me, medical care and lifestyle modifications can lead to impressive improvements in not only erections, but lifespan in general," close quote. Credit agencies, you might say, are akin to nagging parents. They watch a judge from a distance, rewarding responsible behavior and punishing delinquency. And credit scores, they seem a bit like personal Yelp ratings. Miss a payment or max out a credit card and the mysterious 3-digit metric drifts down. Pay your bills, retire your debt, and it floats back up. Now, for the struggling consumer, industry critics say the whole credit system might feel a little big brotherish. And these particular big brothers make errors. A recent investigation by the Consumer Reports found that nearly half of the credit scores and reports prepared by Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion contained mistakes, some of them costly to the consumer's credit. Speaking of mistakes, Nicki Minaj is apologizing about a mistake she made to fans over the postponement of her weekend concert after she was reportedly arrested in Amsterdam. A video shared on social media showed the rapper apologized to fans at a hotel on Saturday after a scheduled show for that evening in Manchester was postponed. Earlier in that day, Minaj was reportedly detained in Amsterdam for allegedly carrying drugs. In the clip that Nicki filmed over the sound of screaming fans, she said, quote, "I wanted to honestly tell you that I love you and I'm sorry this happened," close quote. The NFL commissioner declared his goal for the league, the NFL owners, back in 2010. Roger Goodell expected revenues to hit $25 billion, and that's with a B, not an M, by 2027. And at the time, the NFL generated about $8 billion in annual revenues. And to the audience that he was saying this to, which was the owners of the teams, they really were thinking that's a little bit far out of their price range. Well, fast forward to now, and although the NFL won't publicly divulge those figures, it is believed that annual revenues have surpassed $20 billion, which coincides with a $30 million rise in salary cap to a record $255.4 million per team this year. And with the streaming deals they already have in place with Amazon Prime and Peacock, many within the NFL believe that the $25 billion mark in 3 years' time could be exceeded. And it could quite happen with a possible deal with Netflix. Popular thinking of going with Netflix, first the WWE and now the NFL, possibly. Cracker Barrel stock has taken a beating since the restaurant chain has held an investor call in which its new CEO admitted the Southern Country restaurant chain isn't as relevant as it once was. Julie Fels-Massino, who became the chain CEO 9 months ago, told investors during a May 16 call that the 54-year-old eatery was, in her words, quote, "not delivering the financial results that shareholders deserve," close quote. Now, she also went on to say that Cracker Barrel is a great company and a great concept. It just has to ignite growth, and they have to find a way to revitalize the brand. Now, before Massino and Cracker Barrel's leadership held the meeting, the company's stock hovered around $60 per share. But a day after that call, it dropped almost 20% to about $48 per share. That is, according to NASDAQ. Now, Thursday, that stock closed at a little under $46 per share. Former President Donald Trump spent his weekend proposing a partnership with the Libertarian Party. And this comes on the heels of having a big-time rally at a park in the Bronx. But early indications suggest that it will not be a close or even a harmonious friendship. Libertarians attending the convention in Washington booed and hooted at Trump, even as he pledged to pursue policies limiting the federal government, and argued that supporting third parties undermine common efforts to unseat President Joe Biden. Trump basically was trying to appeal to the Libertarian Party at the event, saying, if you want to back a winner, back me or him. Well, the Libertarian crowd didn't want to hear any of what he had to say. And the former president, who normally does speeches which can come between 60 and 90 minutes, he wrapped it up in 35. In sports on the ice, tonight will be the Stars versus the Oilers in Edmonton, as that series is 1-1, with Edmonton holding the home ice advantage currently. And in the other series, in the Eastern Conference Finals, the Rangers go to overtime, and in Florida, defeat the Panthers 5-4. Now they lead that series, taking back home ice advantage, two games to one. They will play tomorrow night. As I said, Stars and the Oilers, they will be playing tonight in Canada. On the hardwood, it looks like the conference finals might be ending sooner than we think, as the Celtics and the Mavericks hold commanding 3-0 series leads in their conference finals to the Pacers and the Timberwolves, respectively. Game 4 tonight for the Celtics and Pacers. That they'll tip off later on tonight. I think the tip off is about 8 p.m. Eastern. The Timberwolves and the Mavericks, they will tip off tomorrow night. But it looks like we might, as soon as tomorrow night, know who's going to be in the NBA Finals. Wow. Now, turning our attention to weather across the country, it'll be cloudy at 67 in Seattle. It will be thunderstorms at 65 in Minneapolis. It'll be cloudy and 74 in Chicago. Sunny and 81 in St. Louis. It will be with a sun and thunderstorm mix and 70 in Detroit. Over on the eastern seaboard, it'll be rainy and 73 in Boston. There'll be thunderstorms at 71 in New York. It will be a thunderstorm and rain mix. A thunderstorm and sun mix, and a high of 83 in the nation's capital. In the south, it will be partly cloudy and 90 in Miami. It will be thunderstorms and 83 in Atlanta. It will be sunny and 88 in Memphis. It will be a sun and thunderstorm mix and 91 in New Orleans. Over in the southwest, it will be partly cloudy and 96 in Houston. It will be thunderstorms and sun and 94 in Dallas. And time for the high mark in the country, it will be 101 and mostly sunny in San Antonio. It also 101 and sunny in Phoenix. It will be mostly sunny and 80 in Dallas. It will be sunny and 97 in Las Vegas. And over on the west coast, over on the western seaboard, it will be mostly sunny and 59 in San Francisco. It will be partly cloudy and 73 in the City of Angels. And that is your take on today's weather. And now we have started you up. Later, we'll talk about how we are supposed to grieve and how you're supposed to support those who are grieving. And we'll also touch on Memorial Day and what it really does mean. But coming up next, George Floyd. Have we learned anything in the past 4 years? That's a really good question, and we'll unpack that slowly but surely. You're watching the BS3 Presents The Morning Shift with Cole Johnson on the BS3 Network. We will be right back right after this.
BS3 Network, changing the way you watch TV.
Hey, Eagles fan. Join my man Cool McCain and a host of others as they break down every single game, every single week in an objective manner, and also from a fan's perspective as well. Remember, this cast feels just like you. Nobody likes you. And you don't care. Fly, Eagles, fly. Eagles Elite Podcast, every Wednesday at 8:30 p.m. Eastern on YouTube and other podcast outlets. Are you looking for something to do on your lunch break? Well, there's a show on the BS3 Network that has only 4 words to say to you.
We ready, we ready, we ready for y'all. We ready, we ready, we ready for y'all.
The Lunch Break, powered by JM&E. Live weekdays at 1 p.m. Eastern, noon Central.
Welcome back to the Morning Shift with Cole Johnson on the B Street Network. And Shifter, I'm so glad you're here. I hope your Memorial Day is getting off to a good start. And to the Shifter that has commented, that be the Playmaker, I see you. I will actually have that comment because it will lead perfectly into the next segment. But I wholeheartedly agree with your sentiment. And a personal note, but I won't go too far into it. I hope that this day is something that is good for you, and I hope you can find something memorable for you and something that will tie you to something that is good. And so there will actually not be such a drag of a day. It will be something that it will be good and it will be wholesome for you. And actually, for you, we'll touch later on how we're supposed to grieve and how we're supposed to support those who do grieve. That will be the light in the way segment. But for the segment that's coming up, I can't breathe. We remember hearing those words as many of us already in those of our own struggles at the time, struggling with COVID. And we were watching a viral video emanating from Minneapolis, Minnesota. It was one of a man pinned to the concrete near a police vehicle, and the officer putting his knee on the throat, or I should say on the back of the neck of the would-be arrested party. Well, the policeman's name is Derek Chauvin. The name of the person who eventually died is George Floyd. Now, he died 4 years ago, I think as of yesterday, 4 years ago, at the hands or knee of police. Have things really changed? And just my thought, I will touch on the impact of George Floyd and how we live life today. Man. And I remember this like it was yesterday. I just couldn't believe what I was seeing. I thought we were, turning the corner. I know some would probably say, well, just look at the political climate at the time. Well, we could do all that. But this extends beyond politics. This is community. This is something that we kept hoping that the corner would be turned, and then we see that the corner has not been. So here we are, 4 years after the murder of George Floyd, and yes, we can call it a murder. The close-knit Minneapolis neighborhood where that unfortunate happenstance took place, which saw protesters and provocative chants of defund the police have mellowed, but it certainly has not been forgotten. The death that triggered the national debate about social justice and political reform police reform still probably needs to be had as local leaders and residents explore long-term options for the corridor globally known as George Floyd Square. Many question whether there has been any consequential progress on policing reform in the city since the tragedy. I dare say if it has taken place anywhere in the country since then. The executive director of Touch Outreach, or TOUCH Outreach, a Minneapolis violence prevention nonprofit, Mohammed Abdullah Had, had these words to say about that. Quote, I can't say nothing has changed, but we need more support to fully realize that change. People see things through different lenses. Close quote. And I believe that's the problem. I think, we could say that one of the beautiful things about this country is that we can have different shades of views. We can have different to borrow uh, a word from my brother, the intellect, or Eric Butler Sr. In perspective, he would say, it doesn't mean that your thoughts are wrong and another's is right. It doesn't mean that your thoughts are right and another's is wrong. It just means that you have different points of view. For most things, yes, I agree, but I think he would agree with me in saying that in certain things, is if police harm a person and they don't do what they are sworn to do, which is to protect and serve the community, which they do, then the only perspective you have is you have a militia on police uniforms. That's not good for any community. I don't care what color you are. Now, back on May 25th of 2020, you had that incident where Officer Derek Chauvin knelt on the defenseless George Floyd's neck in broad daylight, and it was for about 9 minutes. The horrific series of events was captured on cell phone by a 17-year-old woman, or 17-year-old girl at the time. Now she's a woman. And that sparked a national movement, which we saw a lot of. We saw a lot of BLM protests. We saw a lot of defund the police protests too. Bookmark for that second. Here is, I think, where we have an error. You shouldn't say defund, because that's the wrong message to send. One, two, it's the wrong syntax of message to send. No, if you think an entity is having too much money being put into something, defund, no, that's not the way to go. Divest, on the other hand, that is the way to go. And if you feel as though there's other resources in the community that needs to have more, you divest from one that you think is bloated and you invest in the ones you think are not. So not defund, divest. But again, I digress. For decades, local communities of color demanded in that area of Minneapolis, demanded action to their claims of police injustices, which were validated last year by a Department of Justice investigation. Cries to defund the police from protests were augmented as local politicians tagged on to the demand. Back in December 2020, the Minneapolis City Council newly approved a budget that shifted $8 million from the police department toward violence prevention and other services based on city performance recommendations. By the next year, however, many council members wanted to disband the police. That began walking back their declarations. Some said defunding was not meant to be taken literally, and some said it was up for interpretation. Hence why I said what I just described. Only 2 members who called for defunding police still sit on the council. A number of those members have gone, did not seek re-election, or they just simply were defeated in re-election bids. Mayor Jacob Fry, he spoke to USA Today, and he had this to say about that situation. Quote, when it was asked to me, they were very clear it was getting rid of the police. So clearly, it meant many different things to many different people, close quote. The mayor received intense backlash for rejecting calls to defund the department, obviously, and then he was booed out of a demonstration by protesters when he said the same. Now, despite scant demands for Fry's resignation, voters largely rejected the 2021 measure to replace the police, and Fry handily won re-election. However, meanwhile, Minneapolis police budgets has grown from 181 million 5 years ago to 210 last year, as homicides, burglaries, and thefts are comparable to last year. Fry went on to say the following as well, quote, "My position hasn't changed from the very beginning. I said very clearly, we need deep reform. We need a culture shift. But no, I don't support defunding the police." Close quote. Chief of Police, Ronald Hara, he also spoke to USA Today, and he said this as well, quote, "There's an unbelievable amount of hurt and pain that people still have. There's no way of separating that trauma, whether it's the people who live in the city and have lived through all of this or the police officers from their experiences." Close quote. Part of that culture shift also includes having nonviolence initiatives as police try to regain the community trust. And that was stated by Abdullah Had. Now, the city will open 2 community safety centers to provide social service agencies. The South Minneapolis Center will also house the 3rd Precinct Police Station. As city leaders praised measures that formed after the Floyd's death, such as the Behavioral Crisis Response Program, which sends out unarmed and trained staff specializing in intervention and mental distress, some council members expressed concerns about contracts of violence interrupters. Abdullah Had went on to say about that, quote, "We're boots on the ground. We were there when the police weren't, and we're still here. I hope the council understands their urgency to figure out this quickly. It's getting warmer outside, and that's when crime heats up." Close quote. When I hear about boots on the ground community policing, sort of, I always think back to the Black Panther Party for Reform. And of course, they started back in 1966, and it was basically to, for lack of better terms, to police the police, to actually check to see if the police were doing things that were above board and fair. And of course, it went to the part where when they stormed the state capitol of Sacramento with with rifles, the then governor, who turned out to be President Ronald Reagan, decided to make more restrictive gun laws in California, which, if you had a license back in 66 and 67, you could carry out the open. It would not be frowned upon as anything that's illegal or against the law. But of course, after that incident happened, if you were to do that now, you would get arrested. But again, community policing, it could go one of 2 ways, and always has been the case. But after Chauvin was sentenced back in April of 2021 to 22.5 years in prison for 2nd and 3rd degree murder and 2nd degree manslaughter in Floyd's death, and 3 other Minneapolis police officers involved in convicted of violating his civil rights, Minnesota's top prosecutor knew that the word toward justice was not. Attorney General Gillison, he said to the USA Today, quote, "Justice implies for me some form of restoration, true change. I always felt that we had to win this case in order to get justice, but winning this case wasn't going to be justice." Close quote. Now, after the 2022 death of Amir Locke at the hands of another police officer from Minneapolis, the state legislature passed restrictions on a no-knock warrant. A Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension report found that Hennepin County requested and executed the most of those in 2022. Now, the police chief O'Hara, he took over Minneapolis police in 2022, and he said a big area of reform he wanted to work on was culture and interacting with communities by auditing body cam footage and taking corrective action. Now, the standard operating procedure for Minneapolis police and training board, they couldn't revoke Chauvin's license without criminal conviction for the murder. They received that. So in 2023, the standard changed, and the board now can revoke licenses for conduct violations and use of excessive or unreasonable force. O'Hara also oversaw the Newark Police Department's consent decree, similar to the one that Minneapolis now employs, to hold its department accountable for reform. Now in that area, there seems to be a lot of optimism, which that's always a good thing. Ilhan Omar, the congresswoman from Minnesota, she said 4 years ago she felt hopeful that Trump district and the Black community endured would start a transformation. She went on to say, quote, there was a lot of optimism about what that moment would bring, close quote. But once she championed the call to defund the police, now, though, instead of draining the force, she favors some resources put toward racial equity and community safety programs, saying, quote, it was an aspirational call, an outcry. It's something a lot of people hold on to and what is possible. The desire for there to be allocation, close quote. Abdullah Had, he actually says that while many would like to move on from Floyd's death, collective action and results actually will help make that happen. In saying, quote, we're not just trying to rebuild the city's infrastructure. We're trying to build its character, the trust, the communities, even love, close quote. Now, have there been some changes? Yes. But are there changes that need to still take place? Obviously. There's times when police look at citizens as enemies. There's times where the citizens still look at police as enemies. And when that line can come from enemies to the fact that we have to actually help one another, that's when the change can actually say it took place. But until then, that's when you will have issues, problems, and conflict. And unfortunately, I think we will still have them. Those are just my thoughts. And speaking of thoughts, if there is a program that I think would actually validate your thoughts or make you even think further, my brother Wise Leffy, he has a show called Stuck in My Mind, and it is one where he has a guest, and for about between 35 and 45 minutes, you get an understanding as to why they impact the world for the better and how they got to where they can impact the world for the better. It's thought-provoking, it is riveting, it is inspiring, and it is awesome to watch. That's Stuck in My Mind every Monday, every Tuesday, and every Wednesday live, 5 Eastern, 4 p.m. Central on BS3 Network via Roku TV and the Stuck in My Mind YouTube channel. That is Stuck in My Mind podcast. Catch the interviews that Wise Leffy does with the guest every Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday live at 5 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Central on the BS3 Network via Roku TV and the Stuck in My Mind YouTube channel. Well, coming up next, Memorial Day, and how should we celebrate it? This is a Memorial Day edition of The Morning Shift with Cole Johnson on the BS3 Network. Hope your day is going by well. Mine has gone well too. We'll be right back right after this.
There's a 100% chance of a laugh thunderstorm. 4 men with different viewpoints take a movie, show, or documentary and review it uncensored, unfiltered, uncompromised, with no holds barred. Join BS3, Wilkes, King Doc, and H-Rap B as they take on Hollywood their own way. BS3 Network proudly presents The Forecast, where H-Rap B always predicts,
if I owe you something, I ain't got it. And if you need it, get it from God.
live every Monday at 8:30 p.m. Central. Check your local listings for your viewing and listening pleasure. This is a BS3 Network presentation.
I want to do a TED Talk, but I don't have anything to talk about yet. I'm getting there.
Life is for the living. We're not here that long.
You can learn anything you want to learn without any money spent.
What do I really enjoy? What do I really want out of life?
I am your host, WIZE.
Are you in a life-holding pattern? Well, this is for you. Welcome to the Stuck in My Mind podcast. Live every Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday at 4 p.m. Central. This is a BS3 Network presentation.
So, sit back, tune in, tell a friend. This Dope Cooking Show, we about to get started, and it's about to go down. Check me out.
Join your culinary master of ceremonies, Chef Jeff, as he introduces to you This Dope Cooking Show. Live every Tuesday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern, 5:30 p.m. Central.
Welcome back to a Memorial Day edition of The Morning Shift with Cole Johnson on the BS3 Network. Thank you, Shifter, for getting up even early on a vacation day or a holiday. Glad to share this particular one with you. Of course, I'm Cole Johnson. And to the Shifter Playmaker, he says, look, good morning and thank you to all the servicemen and women who paid the ultimate sacrifice. And that's a wonderful sentiment. And I 100% wholeheartedly agree with that. Now, let me see if I can transition nicely. I probably can't, so I'll just have to go with it. But I guess I could say thank you for your service is a good way to start. I hear that a lot on today, and I'm thankful. I'm thankful I hear it anywhere, anytime. But normally I hear it mostly with two different days. Veterans Day, actually, which of course is every November 11th, and today. And for those who don't know or unaware, I served in the U.S. Army 30 years ago. Actually, technically 31, 32 years ago. Yeah. Aging myself hard. But however, as thankful as I am, though, I know today is not for me. I know it's not today is not meant for me. Even I have to be thankful for soldiers, the airmen, the seamen, and Marines who not only fought in conflict and war, but who paid the ultimate price of death so that I can enjoy the freedoms of doing what you just saw in the previous segment and talking about life in the United States of America. In today's cover story, I'm going to touch on who Memorial Day really is for and why we should celebrate it wholeheartedly and passionately, as we should, and commemorate it. Now, yeah, we can think about it's a wonderful day to grill, and it's the unofficial start to summer. Heck, I mean, this past Saturday, I grilled. And look, my body is still paying for it, but but it's wonderful though when you can actually put forth a time to make your family happy. My wife is from in the air because whenever I grill, she's a happy woman, and I love that. I love to see that. I love to participate in that. So yes, there's certain aspects of joy that are tied into the day and the weekend simply because, well, for many places it's the first time it's actually warm. We're now on the doorstep of June and July and August, where this is normally a time for summer vacations and summer trips and family reunions. So it's, all that time is definitely there, and you definitely think about that. But for many Americans, though, Memorial Day is more than just a long weekend, unofficial start of the summer. The real meaning of this holiday is to honor all the U.S. soldiers who have died serving this wonderful country. Again, We talk about its foibles, we can talk about its warts, and we can talk about its sores. But make no mistake, this country actually is great. Even with its divisions, even with its fissures, even with its myriad of thoughts and myriad of people who may not have your best interests at heart, this is a great nation, and we have to think about that. Originally, it was called Nation Day. Memorial Day's history, it goes all the way back actually to the Civil War. But do you realize that this is actually a newly created holiday? Yeah. It was actually declared a national holiday by Congress only 53 years ago. Yeah. According to the U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs, it actually was declared a holiday in 1971. Now, I mentioned Veterans Day, that's in November. And although it honors military service members, and that there is a day that is commemorated for that and celebrated for that, Memorial Day definitely differs by honoring all military members who died while serving in U.S. forces in any current or previous wars. So I have, well, had, I should say, well, I still have, but just a step grandfather. He died when he was 91, so obviously he didn't die in service, but he served in World War II. It's not meant for him. Yes, he served, and he did a tour in Italy, actually. And I might actually tell one of the stories that he imparted upon my father and me before he died about his time in Italy during World War II. But he survived. Not only did he survive, he thrived. I mean, he did his duty. He went onward to live another 7 decades of his life. So it's not for him. It's not for my father, who still is living to this day. And he served in the Korean War in the Navy. And that was in the mid to late 50s. So it wasn't meant for him either, because he survived that and he lived a life in many different ways that could be considered a life totally different than his military one. No. The late May celebration, or should I say holiday, has also evolved into an opportunity for Americans to, like I said, do the vacation thing, head to the beach or head to the lake, or travel to see family and friends, or even catch up and catch a Memorial Day parade. Now, of the 11 holidays that exist during the calendar year of the United States, Memorial Day is always observed on the last Monday of May, meaning it could be that fourth Monday in May, it could be the 5th, whichever Monday falls last. That is when we celebrate it. And if I'm not mistaken, either holidays are on a specific day or a specific time of year, in terms of like Thanksgiving, for example, 4th Thursday in November. You know, it's like those types of things where it's the last Monday, no matter if it's the 4th or the 5th Monday of May. Now, we celebrate Memorial Day. The first observance of it took place in Charleston, site of a horse racing track that Confederates had turned into a prison holding Union prisoners. Now, blacks in the city organized a burial of deceased Union prisoners and built a fence around the site. And this was reported by Yale historian Dave Blight, New York Times, back in 2011. Then in 1865, on May the 1st, they held an event there, including a parade. Now, blacks who fought in this war participated. Spiritual readings and songs and picnicking took place. A commemorative marker was erected there in 2010. Now, one of the first decoration days that was held in Columbus, Mississippi, April 25th, 1866, by women who decorated the graves of Confederate soldiers who perished in the Battle of Shiloh with flowers, hence Decoration Day. On May the 5th of 1868, 3 years after the end of the Civil War, traditions of placing flowers on veterans' graves were continued by establishment of the Decoration Day celebration or commemoration by an organization of Union veterans, or the Grand Army of the Republic. General Ulysses S. Grant presided over the first large observance, a crowd of about 5,000 people at Arlington National Cemetery on May 30th, 1873. Now, this tradition continues to thrive in cemeteries of all sizes across the country. But until World War I, though, Civil War soldiers were solely on this holiday. After, all are. At least 25 places in the North and South claim to be the birthplace of Memorial Day. Some states that claim ownership of that origin include Illinois, Georgia, Virginia, and Pennsylvania, according to Federal Affairs. But despite conflicting claims, the U.S. Congress and President Lyndon Johnson declared New York's Waterloo as the birthplace of Memorial Day, and that was on May 30th, 1966, after Governor Nelson Rockefeller declared the same that same year. The New York community formally honored local veterans on May 5th, 1866, by closing businesses and lowering the flags at half-staff. Now, why is it celebrated in this month? Well, the day that we celebrate Memorial Day is believed to be influenced by Illinois' U.S. Representative John A. Logan, who was elected to the U.S. House as a Democrat back in 1858 and served as an officer during the Mexican War, which we're talking about late 1840s, maybe 1850, but around the 1840s. It is said that Logan, a staunch defender of the Union, believed that Memorial Day should occur when flowers are in full bloom across the country, according to the National Museum of the U.S. Army. Congress passed an act making May 30th a holiday in the District of Columbia in 1888, and that is according to the U.S. Congressional Research Service. Now, in 2000, the National Moment of Remembrance Act, which created the White House Commission on the National Moment of Remembrance, and encourages all to pause at 3 p.m. local time, Memorial Day, for a moment of silence. That was signed into law by Congress and then President Bill Clinton. Now, as I described earlier, the difference between Memorial Day and Veterans Day are also Armistice Day. Both honor sacrifices, of course, made by veterans. But as I said, veterans, they get Veterans Day, like me. Memorial Day honors all who passed, but it honors all who passed while in service. And I think people don't fully get that connection. You know, there's a song that I heard that, you know, all gave some and some gave all. Well, that pretty much is the sentiment of Memorial Day. We come to remember the some, not S-U-M-S-O-M-E, who gave all. The some who were willing to sacrifice and die so that we could be free. That is what the holiday is for, is to commemorate those who were willing to make that sacrifice. Now, we can talk about the soldiers who, or the airmen who, or the seamen who, or the Marines who probably weren't aware of that sacrifice because they were young, dumb, and, well, I won't go further. But they made the sacrifice anyway. So yes, the men who died in Normandy, who stormed the beaches there in France, the men who died at Iwo Jima, which of course is another front in World War II. The men and women who served in Vietnam and died there. The ones who died in Korea, the ones who died in the War of 1812, the Revolutionary War, or Civil War, or even the conflicts such as Grenada and Lebanon in the 80s, or Bosnia and Somalia in the 90s, or Iraq in the early 90s, and Iraq in the 2000s, and Afghanistan in 2010s. We commemorate them because they served. They served and they died. But we live. And right now, we will take a moment of silence for those who have given their lives for us and our freedom. And that is today's cover story. Now, when we return, how to grieve and how to support those who are grieving. You're watching The Morning Shift with Cole Johnson on the BS3 Network. We'll be right back right after this.
The moderator.
As woman, you can't be too friendly because the minute you're friendly, then they think you're flirting.
The level head.
I think so that thing is over. So I'm not looking at men like that anymore.
The truth slayer.
Okay, what in the HPV yeast infection is going on over here?
The X Factor.
So I'd rather you tell me everything up front and let's start fresh.
The intersection of life and spirituality never sounded this good. BS3 Network proudly presents Life Happens live every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Central. Cool McCain.
You thought you wanted to go through against Chad Gable, but you didn't. And I'm going to tell you why. Chad Gable would take everything that Gunther's done and bury it.
The Playmaker.
It was on site. AJ Styles walked out there, seen LA Knight. Oh, okay, nigga. LA Knight hopped out the car. Let's go.
Break down everything in TNA, AEW, and all of the WWE programming. Join these two kings, monarchs of wrestling, live every Monday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern, 5:30 p.m. Central on the Play Caller Sports Talk YouTube channel. Alicia.
You can't hold somebody to that standard if you haven't voiced what you want and what you're needing from that.
Mika.
If you're not communicating expectations, you're waiting for your feelings to be hurt.
Nicole.
Yeah. A lot of people don't want to take the time out to be alone and to get themselves together.
Ivan.
You got to be willing to work through stuff. And from the jump street, y'all done had problems. Maybe you don't need to be working through those.
BS3 Network proudly presents Queen 3 and King podcast. Live every Tuesday at 7 p.m. Central.
Welcome back to the Morning Shift with Cole Johnson on the BS Network. Glad that you're joining me, I should say, on this special Memorial Day edition. I appreciate you, Shifter. I really do appreciate you. And I appreciate this Shifter right here. My brother in broadcasting, Cool McCain. He says, good morning. Good morning to you, sir. And a happy Memorial Day to all of you. And it's funny that I was seeing Monarchs of Wrestling, and I was thinking about these two brothers, and I know that they've had to deal with what I'm about to talk about, what I'm about to deal with now and talk about now. Now, we talked about Memorial Day. You know, it's a day that we commemorate those who made the ultimate sacrifice and he died for the freedoms that we do currently actually employ and execute and enjoy. But how should we take that sacrifice, whether it's a soldier on the battlefield or a parent of an offspring or even a friend who's a lifeline to you? How should we grieve? And how should we comfort those who grieve? Well, welcome to Lighting the Way. You know, this has been a hard year for me, not necessarily for me dealing with someone dying. I know there'll be a time where I have to deal with that. I know there'll be a time where someone close to me pass. And I will never take that moment lightly. And I don't take the wonderful opportunity of celebrating those who are still alive lightly either. For example, my grandmother Saturday celebrated her 97th birthday. I definitely do not take that lightly. 32 years ago, you know, she had breast cancer. And so I did think that I may have, I had that idea, the young me, that I probably would lose my grandmother when I thought it was before its time. And well, she kicked breast cancer in its behind, and she has since gone and lived 3 decades full. And she still lives. And not in the she's living but holding on to dear life. I mean, she lives a vibrant life. She may not get around like she used to, but she gets around. But I know that day is coming. And it's going to hurt when it does, because I'm going to miss that woman. Same with my father, who he's still alive and he's still roaming and he's still doing his thing. Same with my mother. Same with my mother-in-law, who I consider like a mother. And I know that day is coming, but that day hasn't arrived for me. And I'm thankful for that. But I'm reminded of how powerful that is because of the friends that I know who've had to deal with grieving and deal with anniversaries of deaths. Like my man Cool. I'm not going to mention who. But, you know, Cool. You know, this month has been hard for him because it's a remembrance of a person who's really important to him not being on this earth. With Playmaker, a big time death in his life. He commemorates that around Memorial Day. You know, so it's those two examples. And then there's the obvious example of my best friend and my brother Wise, when his mother passed earlier this year, and now and his mother's birthday takes place right around Mother's Day. So, you know, March was hard for him, and then you had Mother's Day, and then you had her birthday. Just happened about 2 weeks ago, and it was, you know, it was tough. Now I will say this to any and everybody: that brother of mine is probably the greatest and the master at knowing how to grieve and knowing how to be vulnerable while grieving, but still carry forth and carry on with life. In fact, I will admit this: I'm taking notes because I'm seeing how he lives life and how he regards life and how he still has that heart to serve and that heart to help. And then you look at him and you realize, doggone, man, I don't realize something's going on with you. But of course, I'm close with him, I know. But he looks like he doesn't smell like smoke, which is funny because that's exactly how God wants to be during times of grieving. He wants us to have that mentality of, you know, we're smelling like smoke because there's a bigger thing that's taking place besides and beyond this person who now has exited your life in this realm. However, that would make God callous, right? Yeah. But of course, God is not callous. And Jesus reminds us of that, very thing of, well, God isn't callous. The gospel according to Matthew chapter 5, he talks about putting things in its proper perspective, where he said, quote, "Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted." Close quote. I don't care who you are. I don't care how rich you are. I don't care how poor you are. I don't care what shade you are. It doesn't matter. You will mourn something and somebody. I'm not even going to say or. You will mourn something and somebody if you live long enough. In fact, if you or I live long enough, we will mourn many different people and many different things. And you can mourn something as small as a broken heart. And you can mourn something as huge as a good personal, close personal friend. I would love to tell you a story, and I will eventually, about a guy who he came into my life at a time that I needed to have someone like him, and I didn't fully grasp that. But thankfully, I grasped when he was alive. I didn't fully grasp it for like maybe a year or two. And then when I realized, wow, this is a special dude. We had a really good friendship, and I no longer could share life with him anymore. I'll talk about him a little later and then another episode. But I had to mourn that. Man, the mourning process is not all that great at times, but again, it is necessary. Now remember, it's necessary, just like we go through trials of many kinds. That's another one of the trials that we have to endure, because it produces perseverance, and it must finish this work so that when it's at the end, we will be full and complete, not lacking anything. Well, mourning somebody who could be a pillar, or could be a stalwart figure, or could be a mentor, or even could be a protege, or could be an offspring, or could be a close friend, or a sister, or a brother. We all go through mourning. All of us do. But the Lord promised in that scripture, he promised that comfort would come during the grief. Come from him, and they'll come from those whom he sends. I've said this to Playmaker, Too Cool, and Too Wise, all three of them. And I would say to anybody who's close to me, I'd say, look, I won't say a word. I won't say a thing. Just call on my name. I'll be there. And I'll just simply sit and say, all right, go ahead and vent. I'll just sit back and I'll allow you to go. And whatever else you need from me, let me know. I know that because I try to model what I would want to have if I were to be grieving at that time. Because let's be honest, there will come a time where it will be my turn to grieve somebody or something. So if I know there's going to be a time for me where I got to grieve, well, I got to stand in the gap for those who are grieving, especially those who I consider my brothers. So I'm going to stand in the gap for them, and I'm going to continue to stand in the gap for them, because I'm sure that those gentlemen would do the same thing for me if it were me going through the grieving process. Here's the strange thing about grieving. Paul talked to the Romans, and he mentioned in that vein, quote, "For I consider the sufferings of this present time are not or comparing with the glory that is to be revealed to us," close quote. And is from chapter 8, verse 18 from the book of Romans. When we go through things that are dark, when we go through things that are turmoilish, when we go through things that are difficult, something beautiful comes out of it. It's basically like the process of coal. No, not COLE, COAL, where you see it. It's this black chalky substance. But if you put the right amount of pressure, and I say the right amount, not necessarily too much it'll crush it, or too little it won't do anything, but the right type, in terms of if the pressure is just right, that coal can turn into a diamond. Now, you put the wrong kind of pressure on it, that coal, that one lump of coal will turn to whole lots of lumps of coal. But if you put the right pressure on it, something that, and we don't really consider coal ugly, but it could be considered ugly from the standpoint of, well, it's not necessarily great for our health if we breathe enough of it. You put enough pressure on it, that coal turns into a diamond. And that's what the Lord wants to understand. When those things that are happening are bad, and it is bad when we are grieving somebody. And I remember when I mentioned the wise, I said, man, I can't really relate in terms of the levity, the gravity of the person. Because, I mean, I had a friend who died, yes, and I mentioned it earlier. I had a grandfather who died when I was 12. I can't relate to that. He says, bro. And this is the mastery of grieving that I'm talking about when I say this. He said, quote, bro, doesn't matter, man. You went through the grieving process. And just because you went through the grieving process, you know what it is. You know what it's like because you lost somebody that was important to you. Close quote. Now, he said that when he was grieving another pillar in his life. And when you have somebody who has that type of clarity, you can only learn from that and appreciate it. And he's right. He's absolutely right. That's why I said the first statement that mourning is necessary and we all go through it. We will all go through it. If we live long enough, we will lose somebody important to us, and it's going to scar us. And we're going to have to learn how to deal with the scar, and we're going to learn how to rebuild and make that scar something that we remember and not just collapse. Which brings me to the final point, that mourning is perpetual and ever evolving. Now, this lesson I learned from my wife. Now, I met her when her father was still living, but I didn't get a chance to meet him, unfortunately. Because when we reconvened a few years later, he passed away. And I never got the chance to shake the hand of the man who I really believe forged the wife that I now currently have and enjoy. But I learned with her, there are some days that are great, and there's some days that aren't. But even I don't even see how many bad days there are with her, because she will not show me how pained she probably still is from a death that took place now a few decades ago. But that's quite all right. Because I've learned there is life after. And that's not being a callous thing in terms of, well, okay, I'm living without this person. No, that person's still with you. I know that just seeing how my wife is. I know that who would be my father-in-law, is still with her. Still with her in thought. Still with her in body. Still with her in motion. Still with her in mind, body, and spirit. Just not with her in the flesh. And I understand that. because there's a lot of things that trigger her in saying, well, if my father did this, I would do this. What would my father do in this situation? And I know that's how I will be when it'll be my turn of when my mother passes, my father passes, especially my father and my grandmother. I'd say, man, what did my father do here? What did my mother do here? What did my grandmother do? I would think that, because I mean, I know that, because there's times I think about my friend. I'm like, man, what would he do? What would he say with this happening? For example, I had a promotion at a job, and although I was thinking about what my wife would think, and I would think about what friends would think, I should thought about what this friend who now has gone on to the Lord would think. And he was one of the greatest cheerleaders that I've ever met in life. And I try to channel that energy when celebrating anybody else's victory, because he celebrated my victory like it was his. And I always wanted to pay that forward and celebrate other people's victories like it's my own, because it really is my own, because I am tied friend to friend or brother to brother with the person who is succeeding. So yes, understand that we all will go through mourning. That's just a necessary part of life. As Robert Guillaume in Lean on Me said to the Morgan Freeman character, get used to it. I'm sorry, quote, get used to it. That's just the way of the world, close quote. And it is. We all go through moments of mourning. I don't care who you are. If you live long enough, you'll go through it. But the Lord promises comfort to everybody who grieves. You just have to understand that even in the darkest of times, there is light, and it may be coldest of comfort, but it is the truest of comfort, because there's others who have gone through it, and the Lord does not want you to suffer in silence. Although in grieving, more than likely, we're going to have to suffer sometimes in silence, because we've got to make sense of what isn't anymore. We got used to this person being there. We got used to this person's being there. And now this harsh interruption of life means that we have to go forward without this person present being there, without hearing that wisdom, without hearing that advice, without turning to that person, without calling them on the phone, without driving to their house and seeing them, without seeing that smile or laughing at the wisdom when you did something stupid. You have to find a way to live after that harsh interruption of life comes. And that's the comfort that the Lord has to provide us during the grief. Okay, so where else can we get this? Or do I have to insulate this and pull it from out of me? And understanding that, okay, this is going to be the comfort for me, and this is going to be my new normal. Because remember, mourning is suffering. I don't care what it is. Mourning is suffering. But there will be a glory that will be revealed with that suffering. And there will be a joy that will come with that suffering. For example, my brother Wise, when he talks about his mother, he says, man, I'm just so happy that she no longer has to suffer. She's in a better place, that she's happy now, that she can live. And even though she's not on this earth, she now can be pain-free. For a person to have that much clarity about someone so important in his life in such a short amount of time is amazing to me. And that's why I will always be so indebted to having that presence in my life, that understanding of grief, the way he understands it. And no matter what, mourning's perpetual, and it's ever evolving. It's like what Clark Kellogg said about 25 years ago when he said that he lost his mother and father in the same month. He said, quote, It's not something that you won't ever get over. It's not something that you'll ever get over, because you won't. It's not something that you'll ever get past, because you won't. It's just something that you have to get through, because you have to. Close quote. And so when we see those who grieve, we have to understand your life may be good. Theirs may not be at that moment, but you have to put that good upon them so that they know, they're getting through something. So when they get through it, you'll be a help to them. You'll be a conduit to help them see the better day, the brighter day, the grander day. Because that's all they have to hold on to. Holding on to the past could be brutal. It can be good though, but holding on to the past can be brutal. But holding on to the future with the memories that they shared with that special person, that's what makes it special. And you being a presence in that person's life who's grieving, that'll be what will make you special. Well, I will, before I step away, I will say that this episode is dedicated to those who are grieving anything and anybody, especially those who lived and died on the battlefield for our freedom. So ultimately, to those who served and died, this is dedicated to you. To those who are grieving important people in their lives, this is also for you. So this does go out to my man Wise. It goes out to my man Cool. It goes out to my man Playmaker. It goes out to my man Drew. Just know that comfort will come. It may not come in the way you see it, but it will come. And know that there will be a brighter day. It may not look it. It may not feel like it, but it will come, because it has to come. And that's all the time I have for today. Thank you so much for joining me on this especially special edition, the first holiday edition of the Morning Show with Cole Johnson, the BSC Network. We thank you all for liking, for sharing, for subscribing, for commenting even, and for hitting that notification bell so you can get every single content that comes from the BS3 Morning Shift Cole Johnson YouTube channel. So for all of us here at the Morning Shift, all of us here at the BSN Network, and for myself, I will say in parting, as I always do, if you lack commitment, you will not start. If you lack consistency, you will not finish. And if you lack love, you most certainly will never conquer. Until we meet again in 23 hours, everybody, thank you, Shifter, for a wonderful, wonderful day. Be blessed on this Memorial Day. I love you. See you tomorrow.